Hello and welcome to this selection of crunchy Euro games in our AwSHUX April video preview series. In a year where conventions aren't really happening and publishers can't demo their games in person, we're stepping in to take a look at some new and upcoming releases on their behalf at our own digital convention. Now, before we get started on these previews, it's important to mention that they are previews, not reviews. We've just read the manuals for these things and not actually played them. We're just going to give you a general gist of what they're about, and that is all. First up, in this selection of previews, we've got Iberian Gauge, the latest in the Iron Rail series from Capstone Games, and maybe the most crunch per minute in any of these previews. For those of you that aren't aware, Capstone Games has been on a mission to make the genre of 18xx train games a little bit more approachable, with slick art design from Ian O'Toole and these lovely single-page rulebooks. And each game in the series has been a twist on the formula, and Iberian Gauge is no different. But the basics remain the same. Iberian Gauge sees players competing to build profitable rail companies across the Iberian Peninsula, trying to wring the most profit from the least collaboration, as the player with the most money at the end will win. The game is played over a number of rounds, shown by this red tracker here. In each round, the tracker will move, and the symbol shows us what kind of round we're playing. First up, this symbol means we're playing a stock round. In stock rounds, players take turns purchasing shares in these train companies, placing their ownership cubes in these slots, and starting or investing in each of the companies. If you're the first player to buy a share in a company, then a couple things happen. First off, you get to choose where that company starts out, placing one of their trains in a major city. You will then take their little disc and put it at the lowest space on this dividends track, which will show you how much that company will pay out to shareholders. You will also set that company's starting share price. Here, it's $20 to invest in Orange Rail, and because you bought a share, you'll pay that much into the company's treasury. If players want to invest in a rail company that's already started, they simply place a cube and pay the share cost into that company's treasury without doing the extra placement and dividend stuff. Once every player has finished buying stocks, we move into the build phase, where each company, in turn, will build rail based on how many players have invested in it. In this game, the blue company will place first, with green placing the first piece of rail, followed by blue. And each piece of rail built by any player will cost money, but that money doesn't come from the players, it comes from the company that we've just invested in. It costs $4 to build on an empty space, or $8 to build on one of these mountain spaces, and there's a limit of 1 train per space, excluding these cities. Now, something that is interesting here is that you can pay another company to lease their track when building, allowing you to unnaturally extend your rail into further off territories at the cost of paying that company some money. And this is extra important because not only does it allow you to siphon money between companies that you have more of an interest in, but also because these spaces are the heart of Iberian Gauge. Each of the cities on the board will give bonuses to the companies that build in them. Some will increase dividends when that company pays out, and some will increase the actual share value of the company itself. And as well as this, if you manage to connect 5 major cities, you'll get a special dividend bonus depending on what company does it. Once a railroad has finished building for a turn, it's time to pay dividends. This is based on the dividends value over here, so blue will pay out 4 to each of its shareholders. So the green player and the blue player each get $4. Dividends for unpurchased shares go straight into the company. So as companies start becoming more distributed amongst the players, they begin to run out of cash injections. But there is one final twist. If a rail company fails to connect to a new urban or major city on its turn, its share price will drop 1 space per player-owned share. So you're incentivized to keep building outwards, or are you? The motivations of players are going to change as their interests vary between these different companies. At the end of the game, each player will add the value of their cash in hand to the value of their stocks in each of the rail companies, and whoever has the most money will win. And that is all of Iberian Gauge, a grand introduction into the wider world of 18xx games. Some of the little maneuvers you can pull in this game are like learning a whole new board game language, siphoning money between companies and manipulating the stocks in exciting ways. So if that sounds like something that is your cup of tea, then Capstone Games have got you covered with Iberian Gauge and the rest of the Iron Rails series. My Father's Work is a gothic horror-tinged Eurogame where players take the role of competing mad scientists over the course of 3 generations, recording forbidden knowledge and using their dusty old estate to carry out devious experiments. The game is played using an app that will demand choices of the players and affect the fate of the villages around your estates, acting like an interactive storybook that'll add twists and changes into the game itself. Players will chiefly earn points by performing experiments, aiding the town, and upgrading their estates, but crucially, all their resources will be lost to time. Because My Father's Work is played over 3 generations, any resources gathered by one generation are not passed down to the next, merely the estate and the knowledge remains. At the start of the game, you'll set up this chunky main board, placing the Village Chronicle book in the centre, and give each player their estate board and coloured pieces. Then you'll put your miniatures on their bases. This hexagonal base denotes which of the miniatures is you. The circles are your servants, the square is a caretaker, and this circle with little dots on it is your spouse. These special bases show where you can place a character, but we'll get to that later. For now, each player will get dealt a masterwork card, what they're trying to achieve over the course of the 3 generations. This player is trying to build a time machine, and the other wants a giant spider chariot. Then we will begin. We will play 3 generations, and each generation has 3 rounds representing each section of your current character's lifespan. And at the end of each generation and round, we'll consult the storybook, which will add twists to the game as we go along, depending on what scenario we're playing. We're playing with the cost of disease scenario, but there'll be 3 included in the box when it comes out. At the start of each generation, each player will draw some experiment cards that will get them points and knowledge if scored, as well as a little income of cash, and then they can start placing their workers. The game is divided into 2 main banks of spaces, the village and the estate. And you can go to any space that has a little red banner like so. And this is where these differently shaped bases come into play. You'll likely want to send your servant and spouse to take actions in town, because if they take actions in your estate, they're probably going to go mad. That's what your caretaker is for with this square base. They can take actions without you losing them. The hexagonal based piece that represents yourself can take actions in either the town or your estate, and they get the added bonus of taking double actions when they go to town, so I can get twice as many animals if I go to the farmer's market here. As well as this, some locations will cause damaging effects. The cemetery here will increase your creepy meter and increase the town's anger towards you. We'll start by talking about the town actions you can take, but that might be a bit difficult because, as you can see by this book, they change from game to game. But often the following core spaces are going to appear often. These spaces let you gather resources or knowledge, this space will let you upgrade your estate, and this space will make the town less annoyed at you. And this is important because if you ever become too creepy for the town and pass this marker, you're banned from taking town actions, relegated back to your estate. Some spaces will also cause you to become more mad, and if you reach these spaces, you'll draw compulsion cards, random tasks that are suddenly integral to your work that must be finished before anything else. And if you have 2 compulsions at the end of a generation, you'll earn yourself a maladjustment, a permanent change into how you play the game. But what won't change are the actions you can perform on your own personal estate board. These will set up and perform various experiments that earn you points. Recording knowledge allows you to spend cards and knowledge cubes to move your personal marker along this tracker, giving future knowledge that's going to be handed down to the next generation. Reaching the last space will let you build a vanity upgrade, giving you a scoring bonus at the end, like this operating theatre or Tesla coils. And now we come to the final, most important space in the whole game, the perform experiment space on your estate board. This is where you will play the experiment cards from your hand at the start of the game, playing the A cards for a smattering of knowledge and some early points. As the game goes on, you'll start experimenting with the B and C decks, more involved experiments that'll get you more points, but less knowledge. And after you've built up a healthy pool of knowledge and stack of prerequisites, you'll come to your master work, the hardest thing of all to build, that'll give you a huge amount of points in the endgame. But it might all be for nothing, because at the end of a generation, your previous experiments and resources are wiped. It is only the knowledge and the estate that remains to help future characters. Now, what is interesting is this whole core gets tweaked and changed every time you play it by the scenario you're playing. Because we're playing Cost of Disease, there are other little systems and minigames that get filtered into the core experience. There will be player choices at the end of every round and at the end of every generation, and when reaching certain milestones, such as here with these Insanity and Angry Mob trackers. There are also extra gameplay systems folded in with every scenario. In this first one, we're trying to do dubious bartering to gain heart tokens with the village, which can be spent or used for spoilers later on. To give you an idea of what you can expect, in the first game, one of the players can be elected mayor of the town, and that is just one of the paths I went down when playing a demo game. And that is just the first game of one scenario of many. The game will have 3 individual scenarios that will unlock new maps and new components every time you play them. And that is my father's work, a worker placement game packed with narrative, player choice, humour and horror from Renegade Games.
Next, we have an absolutely stunning game for you. This is the beautiful Honey Buzz, 100% organic strategy, published by Elf Creek Games, who I'm learning in this set of preview videos make some of the nicest boxes in the world. Now, what we've got here is a strategy game of competing bees. I know, you've heard it 1,000 times. You probably haven't heard it 1,000 times. This is a really innovative kind of game. In this game, the bees have decided they're done making honey for just themselves. They're going to export their business and their honey to the rest of the forest. You're going to build up your hive. You're going to create honey. You're going to fulfill orders to charming woodland animals. And the player who does this the best will become, get ready, the queen bee's new accountant. I know, be still, you're beating capitalist heart. So, how do we play? What are we doing? Well, I will tell you, but first off, I need to draw some attention, not just to all of the beautiful art in this game, but specifically to these honey tokens. They are made out of this absolutely breathtaking, tacky, translucent plastic. We joke a lot about putting board game components in our mouths on Shut Up and Sit Down. These are the first board game components where if there was a baby in the room, I would be putting these in my pockets to make sure the baby didn't just cram them all into their mouth, because that's just how tasty these tokens are. I'm not going to talk about these tokens the whole time. I'm going to teach you how to play Honey Buzz. So, what we got? Well, on your turn in Honey Buzz, we've got a 2-player game here. We've got pink and blue that I've set up. On your turn, mostly, you are going to be taking a honey tile. You're going to be taking one of your workers, and you start the game with just one worker bee, and you're going to put that anywhere on this board, although this place in the bottom left costs extra. You're going to have to pay money if you want those tiles. And in placing that worker, you're going to grab a tile, and you're going to connect it in your hive so that the yellow sides of the tile match up with other yellow sides of your tile. Now, the way that puzzle works is such that you are not going to be able to avoid making little circles, little hexagonal circles throughout your hive. And that's actually what you want to achieve, because every time you fully enclose somewhere, you are going to then get the actions around it. So as you build your hive, when you complete a circle, that circle sort of triggers all of the action spaces around it. And I'll explain what that means in a second. But I will also just jump back to this worker placement to tell you that the way it works is that if another player then wants to place a bee on that same space, get this same kind of hexagon, they have to spend 2 workers. So it's either 1 worker somewhere else or 2 workers here. At the start of the game, that's not going to happen because everyone only has 1 worker. But I'm going to show you how you get new workers now. If you look here around this circle that I've just completed, this little baby larva, that symbol means that I get to have a new baby bee, and that's going to go in the nursery. So when I recall my workers, I get another worker. Other actions include foraging. This is how you're going to get that honey. This symbol here means that you get to jump over to this lovely forage board and move your bee orthogonally 1 space. And if you can host that kind of tile, then you can take it. Why wouldn't you be able to host it? Because you need to build your hive in different ways in order to hold different kinds of flower. Now, this confused the bejesus out of me when I first saw it, until the manual pointed out that you can simply look at the number of red borders on the hexagons that you've created. Once you have got nectar tiles of various types, this cooling action is going to let you what bees do best: fan their wings to cool nectar into honey, apparently. That is going to enable you to place your fan piece anywhere in your hive, and all adjacent nectar spaces then produce honey. Meanwhile, this action, lot B-roll in this video, is going to enable you to sell that honey either at the open market or by completing orders that these absolutely beautiful animal illustrations depict. And that's the basic turn structure of the game. You're going to send workers to acquire tiles, to create circles to hopefully allow you to forage, to claim nectar, which will ultimately allow you to make honey and then sell that honey, and hopefully you're doing all of this more efficiently than your friends. Things to consider though, is that there are other actions. There's these tiles over here you have to pay money for, but this accountancy action, I'm in love with the idea of bees doing accountancy, is going to make you money, and money is victory points, which is a wrinkle I always quite like in Eurogames, where you're spending money to improve your engine, but that money you're spending, that money is your points. Ooh, there are also Queen's challenges that are randomly shuffled and dealt during the game that is going to reward players with victory points for doing things like fulfilling orders fast, but also creating clusters and straight lines in their hive. Now, ordinarily at this point in the video, I would sort of extrapolate what this game must feel like to play and what I like about the design, having read the manual. In this case, I have absolutely no idea what this would be like to play, and that is kind of fabulous. It's not very often that a board game comes along that is both thematically and mechanically not quite like anything I've ever seen before. And there's more. There is a solo mode in the Honeybuzz box, but also there is an advanced mode that swaps the field of flowers over so that they are all face down, and as your bees fly around, you are only then getting to peek at these tiles. So it incorporates a little memory game. If you want a particular kind of honey, you have to remember where you saw it, as if you were a real bee. I like bees, I do. If you're like me and you enjoy bees, but also fantasy novels, curveball recommendation for you here. The Bees by, I'm reading off my bookshelf, Lane Paul is a book that is basically sort of uses bee biology to tell an Arthurian epic, and it's really pretty good. I'd happily recommend it if you need something to read and you like bees. There you go. You came here for a preview of Honeybuzz, and I ended up recommending to you a bee book. You never know what's going to happen in these previews. Let's see what's going to happen with the next game.
This is Brew from Pandasaurus Games, a game all about using your element dice to wrestle control of the forest or gobble up goods from a local village. And during the game you'll be building a little roster of creatures like these and a drinks cabinet filled with delicious, tasty potions that will offset any luck and propel you through this game like a dolphin through custard. We've got dice rolling in this game. We've got worker placement over here. We've got area control. That's a real spicy paella of mechanics that board gamers like. And all of it is drenched in some remarkably lovely cartoon art, which I'm sure I will take some time to decadently pan over like this a bit later. So at the start of the game, we're going to set up the board with a nice village, a forest of forests, and some creature stacks over here, and some potion stacks over here. And then each player is going to get their custom character, a couple of element dice, and their own foraging dice, as well as a little spicy berry they're going to use later on, and some reference cards so they know what's happening in the game. And then we can begin. What do we want? Points. And when do we want them? Over the course of 4 rounds, please, in which we will roll dice and take turns. Each turn, once you've rolled your dice, like so, is made up of a couple of different steps. 3 steps. You must place a dice from your pool. You may brew a potion from the market, and you may slam that potion, drinking it and scoring points for that deed later on. Now, we can do these in any order, but we're going to talk about them in an order, and we're going to start with dice placement. When you choose to place a dice, you can pick any one of these from your dice pool and place it on a space. You've got spaces in the forest, and you've got spaces in the village here. The forest is going to get you ingredients and creatures, and the village will let you take special actions. Now, when you're placing a dice, you've got to follow some rules. Firstly, the forage dice can only go on a matching space, like so, and you can't go on a space where someone else already is these element dice can go on any space as long as someone isn't there, and they can also go on their matching spaces down here in the village. The big exception are these spaces at the top here, this any dice space. Any number of people can sit on those, and you can use any dice that you want to go there. Now, what do these spaces do? Well, if you go to the forest and grab ingredients, guess what? You get one of those kind of ingredients. So we went to the forest and we got some nice tasty mushrooms. Very, very nice. If you choose to go to one of these horn spaces, then you get a creature. You can pick creatures from these piles over here, and they will sit next to your board, tamed and ready to go. We've got some kind of hideous koala creature here that's very cute, but also kind of spooky. Now, you'll probably want to do this because dice that are placed in forests are going to contribute to control, which we'll talk about later. But there's also some nifty rules for if you're using element dice on standard spaces. If you use a water dice on a standard space, then you triple the resources you get. I'd get 3 little gemstones for going there. A fire will go over someone else's dice, burning that dice and wresting control away from them. And the last kind of dice, the wind dice, will let you place on top of your dice, zoop, and take them away, so you get an extra action later on, which is quite nifty. Now, we should probably move on to talk about the village, and some of these village spaces are going to do a bunch of things that are self-explanatory, like this one lets you gain ingredients, this one lets you train a creature, this one lets you bin all of the element dice from all the forest, which is pretty huge. But there's a couple down here. This one, gather 1 and reveal and reserve a potion. That's about potions. We haven't talked about potions yet. So let's talk about those now. So brewing a potion is the second thing you can do on your turn. You may brew a potion. And brewing a potion, super simple. Spend the ingredients, so I'd have to spend a gems and a mushrooms, and I would brew this potion and place it into my hand. Now, you can use energy berries, which you got at the start of the game, to substitute for any ingredient. Those are wild, and you can spend on anything you fancy. But also, we were explaining about this reserve space. What's going on with that? If you reserve a potion, then you take it and you put it next to your player board, and now only you can brew that potion. You've stashed it away because you want its cool effects. How do we get those effects? The last thing you can do on your turn is drink a potion, and that potion will resolve its special power and then be put behind your character to score points at the end of the game. That is nice and simple. Now, if you've got no dice left at the end of your turn, then your turn is skipped until the round is over. You can't take any actions until the end of the round. And then, at the end of the round, we will check a bunch of things. Firstly, we will see who has claimed these forest spaces. We do this by seeing if any player has more forage dice than any other individual player in that forest region, and has more forage dice than element dice in that region. If both of those are true, then you get to take it home. So here, we wouldn't have control. We've got the most forage dice, but we don't have more than the element dice. Here, we're tied, and we don't have more than element dice. But here, we're all on our lonesome. So we get to take this forest card and take it home over to our little player board. How sweet. Any forests that are not claimed are going to be discarded and then replaced, so we'll have a new set ready for the next round, which I'm messily laying out on the table here. Oh my goodness. Oh, and here we will also check to see if we've got through all of the forest cards in the deck, and if that's the case, then the game will end. But if not, we'll start a new round. Each player will get their dice back from the forests or from the village, and then we'll do something pretty special. Look, you ready? We flip the village, which means we get a whole new set of actions for the next round to take in the town. Now, before wrapping this teach up, we should probably talk briefly about creatures and end game scoring. You can only have 3 tamed creatures at any time, and they'll give you different effects that can be used in conjunction with your actions, or sometimes just at any time, or sometimes at the end of the round. But if you want to get rid of one to make more room for more creatures, you can always release it, placing it in a little stack next to your player board over here. But what's important, there's this lovely little thematic touch. If you own a piece of forest that matches the same season as that creature, you've given it a little home, and it's going to score more points at the end of the game, which is quite delightful. So at the end of the game, players are going to add up their points for pretty much everything. You'll get them for brewed potions, you will get them for any claimed forest spaces you have, you'll get them for any released creatures you have, and you'll get them for any victory point tokens that you just have lying around near your player area, or any ingredients you've got left over. And that is Brew from Pandasaurus Games. Just an utterly lovely visual style going on here with some easygoing mechanics. Lovely, lovely stuff. And it's available for pre-order from Pandasaurus right now, which is absolutely delicious. And now I'm going to do what I promised, which is just gently pan over some of the nice... Look at that one. Look at that owl. Look at these houses. Cool. Bye!
On today's AwSHUX preview, we have Cryo, a game from Z-Man Games for 2 to 4 players, aged 13 and up, and it says it takes about an hour to an hour and a half to play a game. Now, this is a game of landing on a planet badly. It's not the best landing in the world. Your ship gets split up into bits all over the planet, and you have to try and look out for your people as you compete to try and get most of your little cryopods, your little frosty human popsicles, into the cave network under the ground before the time runs out, the sun sets, and the planet becomes uninhabitably freezing cold. The person who wins the game is the one who gets the most points, and most of your points are going to be gained by managing to shuffle your cryopods into these caves, and also by having the most control over these caves. It's going to be like, I am the master of this particular cave. Hear my wrath. Managing that, though, is going to be a far trickier pickle. On your turn, you're going to be able to take one of your drones and place it on one of the free available slots on the board in these 4 different zones. Now, broadly, these zones are going to be related to the economies you're going to be working with during the game. Collecting and spending pink crystals, metals, purpley, magical, universally useful stuff, and this lovely organic material cube. My particular favourite on account of the fact that it is green and gold and reminds me of a fudge-flavoured ice lolly from when I was a kid. If there's any backdoor into my heart, then it is literally that. Now, as you take it in turns to put your drones onto these different locations, you're going to be able to choose to do a whole bunch of different things. For example, if we look here, this slot will allow me to do any of these 4 things. 2 of these things are simply take one of these little tiles, which we'll come back to in a little bit. They're pretty neat. Or spend a resource to do a thing. And each of these locations allow you to do a standard kind of action, which is to spend organic materials to pull a cryopod off of that location back onto your board. You kind of need to rescue people from the ships before you can hide them underground. If you're playing with fewer players, then you're going to be putting more of these damage tokens on the board, blocking off options and just keeping the decisions a little bit hairy. And just like the colour work in this game is lush, the iconography is very sharp and readable too. In this example, we can spend up to 3 metals to do 3 card actions. That's either drawing cards or playing cards. Now, cards in this game particularly are very interesting in the fact that each card can be played to do 3 different things. First of all, it can be slotted on the left hand side of your board, ka-chunk, to give you an end of game objective that's going to get you more points. Secondly, it can be slotted at the top of your board, ka-chunk, which is going to give you a upgrade, an ability upgrade, an extra buff, some sort of power that you have for the rest of the game. Thirdly, in fact, there's 4 things. You can scrap it for resources, but thirdly, you can put it on the bottom of your board to get yourself a vehicle. Now, vehicles have slots for more cryopods, which means after you've filled up your board with 3, you can continue to add more of them when you're rescuing these people from the planet, put them on the vehicles, and eventually then spend these vehicles to take the cryopods down into the depths of the planet. As the game goes on, people are going to be scouting the network, and you're going to be revealing more and more of these underground cave locations, and generally rushing to pull people out of the ship and get them into the caves. But the process of getting that is a little bit fiddly. First of all, after you've taken some people out of cryo, there's the temptation to maybe put them back on the planet, but not in the safe place. Over here, for example, if we're to fly one of the drones over here, we can choose to set one of these cryo workers to work mining us resources. Can you just stay on the planet for a bit longer? I'm sure it's safe, and I'd really like some Brussels sprouts or some metals. You are, of course, going to have to go and take another action to pull them back off so you can hopefully get them underground, or maybe just accept that they're not coming back. The game tends to trundle along as each round has you resolving a situation token, which might just be, hooray, you've just looted some pink gems, good for you, or oh no, actually this entire section of the ship has exploded and all the cryopods in it have now been destroyed. Thankfully, no one was killed because those cryopods were all filled with gloves. We'll say they were just gloves. So you need organic materials to get the cryopods out, and then you need cards to play to make vehicles so you can store the pods so you can get them underground. But then getting them underground costs electricity, and moving further and further through the network is going to cost you more and more. So you've got a lot of juggling of economics to do in order to make it through to the end of the game and keep some people alive. And this is where I think kind of the neatest thing about this game pops into life. Every time you land a location and take one of these tokens, on the back of it, it's going to reveal some resources. This is a pretty tasty one. I have got here a green and pink on one tile. That means that wherever I put this, it's going to require or get me one organic material and one pink crystal. Ideally here, I could just put this here, and then what happens is, after each round, when we've all sent out one by one, sent our ships down to different locations, done the actions, got the bonuses from there, we then take an action, simply pull everything back. And in doing so, we choose to put our 3 drones, because you only ever have 3, onto whichever of the 6 slots we want to, in order to activate the bonuses that exist underneath them. At the start of the game, you're not really going to have any, but as you go on, well, it's up to you. So if I put it here, for example, this drone lands back here, and immediately I just simply get 1 green resource and 1 pink resource. Pretty tasty. However, in this one, I can choose to place a tile which allows me to then spend the resource at the top in order to free up a cryopod from anywhere on the board. And each board has one location in which the input and the output are completely up to you. So for example, if I had this, it might be quite tasty to say, hey look, every time I land a drone back there, I can turn 1 metal into 2 pink crystals. Now that's what I call business. So there's a lot of juggling different resources, but you're also limited in terms of how many of each resource you can have at any one time, as you try to juggle things as best you can to get those pesky frozen people into the cave so you can save their blimmin' lives. And that is Cryo. Thank you very much for watching. See you next time. Next up, I'm excited to be looking at the biggest game, perhaps, in our AwSHUX previews. This is Dwellings of Eldervale, published by Breaking Games and designed by Luke Laurie. And what we have here, aside from a giant box that you'll never guess this came from Kickstarter, is a hybrid of 2 different genres of games that I think a lot of you might be big fans of. This is a hybrid worker placement game where you put workers on spaces to get rewards, and then you spend those rewards on useful things that ultimately get you points. Then you win, and then you feel better than your friends. You're a better human. So it's a hybrid of a worker placement game and a fantasy thematic battle game with lots of dice chucking. Quinns, I don't understand. You're saying, how did those 2 genres combine? I'm going to tell you, that's what these videos are for. Just calm down. So, ordinarily, Dwellings of Eldervale is going to spread across your whole table. I've kind of got just a 2-player game here with a blue player taking on a red player and their private belongings. Then you've got the map you're competing over and a kind of elemental board here. And then these are just kind of banks holding cards and treasure tokens. Then these are monsters. We're going to meet them later. So yes, I've collapsed it into the frame so you can see everything. But ordinarily, this would cover your whole table. So let me walk you through what you're doing here. First, plot. Dun-dun-dun. The land of Eldervale was absolutely dumpstered by a great magical cataclysm long ago, and the players in Dwellings of Eldervale are kind of showing up and saying, hey, this place seems full of cool magical stuff. What if we made a home here and got great magical power and built little dwellings? Hence, Dwellings of Eldervale, because you're going to be making little dwellings. I'll talk a bit about how you win as well. So over on the magic track, players are going to be advancing different score counters down different kinds of magic, and every time you play, you're going to have a different selection of magic. In a 2-player game, there are just 4 types of magic, as you can see. And as you advance up these tracks by claiming magical power, for example, fire power, let's imagine at the end of the game, you'd all gotten all the way up to the top to 5 victory points for your fire power. Then for your fire magic, you are going to get 5 points for every dwelling you have on a fire space, and also every secret fire dungeon card that you've got in front of you. More on that later. So it's kind of the strategy in the game, I guess, is deciding like all previews, I haven't actually played this, is figuring out how you want to spread your magic, what you want to focus on, and what kind of bits of the board you think you can take control of. But let me just talk you through what a turn looks like. On your turn in Dwellings of Eldervale, either you're going to put a worker on the board, or you're going to take all your workers back and put them in your tableau. So this first bit is going to be familiar to anyone who's played a worker placement game. Let's imagine it's Red's turn. On Red's turn, they might place their worker on any of the 5 sort of neutral elemental buildings that are in every game, or you'll go to one of the brightly coloured spaces to get resources. So let's imagine I do that. I go here and I get a tile. Later on, when I have a bunch of resources, I could spend another worker, or I'm not going to go back and forth between these players. I'm not Rado. That's too difficult. So I'm going to, let's imagine, go to the portal. That lets me summon a new kind of worker, because in Dwellings of Eldervale, yeah, you've got sort of vanilla workers, but also you can have an wizard, or a cool warrior, or an dragon. So that's cool, and these are just work. You can send a dragon to go and do your menial labor for you. Isn't that fun? I should mention here as well, in a kind of turbocharged Terra Mystica style, every player in Dwellings of Eldervale gets a unique faction which has unique abilities, and, check this out, every faction board is double-sided. So if you're the red faction, you can play 2 different fantasy factions with really, really lovely illustrations on, particularly taken with these bird people, the skyborn avians. Yes, so, where was I? Right. So you can spend resources to get new workers. You can spend resources to, you can claim spaces permanently by putting your dwelling on them. Well, you don't claim the worker placement space, but you mean that no one else can put a building on there. But to do so, and this is adorable, have to put a little hat on your worker to turn them into a house, to show that that worker now lives in a house, or at least has a roof over their head, like wearing a lampshade at a kind of 1970s party. And that worker is now gone. So there's an interesting puzzle for you in Dwellings of Eldervale. You can claim these victory point producing dwellings, but every dwelling you produce means you have 1 less worker for the rest of the game. So that's foxy. Also, you are going to, another big common action you're going to be doing in this game is expanding the map and your own tableau. So check this out. Let's imagine that, I'm going to stick with the red player. Red player went to the dungeon here. Now that hex card hieroglyphic, what that means is that, first off, we're going to take a hex. We're going to expand Eldervale by, placing this kind of hex, and that's going to go there, and then we would place more resource tiles on it. But then this double card symbol means you can go shopping for 1 or 2 cards off of these different elemental decks. And if you can afford the cost in the top right, you can claim these cards, which is going to propel you further up the corresponding elemental track. But also, in doing that, you will be slowly building up a tableau of personal worker placement spaces that are like dungeons. Your workers, only your workers know where to go. So when you have put enough workers onto the board, or all of your workers onto your board, on your next turn, rather than placing a worker, you'll bring everyone back, and this is really cool. In lots of other games, the way that would work is you bring everyone back, and they go back to your board, and then that's your turn. But in Dwellings of Eldervale, doing this is actually an opportunity to do a super worker placement space action, putting all those workers on all of your private worker placement spaces, which include the card tableau you've drafted, as well as this little card you start the game with, so you can go gathering, you can build a dwelling, you can summon stuff. But look, that gather action has that square, which means we can place tiles that we've earned so that you're permanently improving the gather action on your card. Is that everything in Dwellings of Eldervale? No way. This game's a feast of stuff and bits, and we're just getting started. I haven't mentioned that every character at the start of the game gets dealt 5 magic cards, and these are an additional resource of special little one-shot powers you can play either during the game or at the end of the game that to spice things up further with some sort of card play. But the main mechanic in Dwellings of Eldervale that I haven't talked about, because it's not active at the start of the game, but will be once everyone's placed their workers and pulled them all in once, is combat. After everyone's pulled their workers back once, the piece is over, and Dwellings of Eldervale's really interesting combat mechanics kick in. So, the way that this works is, let's imagine we have some workers on the board. You can, in fact, place a worker into a space where someone else is. And doing that, it does still get you the action of that worker placement space, but after that, there's a fight. And the way that this works is, first off, players are all given the opportunity to send units in adjacent spaces, dashing into that fight, and then everybody rolls dice that are dependent on the kind of workers they have in that fight, and whoever gets the higher number wins the fight and kills everybody. Literally everything. So let's imagine that blue won this fight here. The 2 red soldiers in the fight, or 2 red workers, I should say, go all the way over here, down the loser chute to the underworld. Also, blue, as a privilege for winning that fight, will advance up the glory track, getting them better and better and better rewards. The real annoying thing about the underworld, though, is that when you recall workers back, so this worker who survived, I can put this worker who survived on a card, same as I described before, but dead workers do not go to your home worker placement spaces. So dead workers instead just go to the sort of bank of workers ready to be placed again. So that's kind of foxy, but not as foxy as the giant monster miniatures. I know, it's criminal. These huge plastic monsters, and I haven't talked about them yet. So at the start of a game with Botics of Eldervale, there is usually 1 monster, no more than 1 certainly, on the map. And the way that these work is once pieces off the table, if you place a worker adjacent to a monster, the monster goes charging into that space that you are in, and you get the action of the space you use, but then the monsters are going to try and eat you. And then you roll off dice against the monster and perhaps kill the monster. And if you do so, again, you can advance up the special magical tracks that act as a victory point multiplier at the end of the game. Or you can get glory, up to you. And all of these monsters, same as the factions, all have their own special abilities. For example, this dragon actually is, in fact, the only monster in the game who is peaceful. The dragon will not go charging in if you go next to it unless you want it to, I guess by calling it a mean name. But also, because the dragon has a divine presence, when the active player places a unit in the same realm or any adjacent realm, you get victory points. This beautiful shimmering dragon is just belching victory points out to people until someone kills it. So that is a brief overview of Dwellings of Eldervale. I should also mention that Dwellings of Eldervale comes with a ton of optional modules, different monsters, different decks that you're going to play with in different games. There is lots of variety, lots of different ways to play, and included in the manual is a team game, which I always like to see. So that is Dwellings of Eldervale. Oh, and the very last thing I should say about it is that we were sent the Legendary Edition. So what you see on here with the nice wooden tokens and the big monster pieces, that might not be in all copies of Dwellings of Eldervale, so please do your due diligence before you spend money on it. If you're really excited by metal coins and pieces of wood, make sure you get the right version. Thank you very much. Let's see what the next game is. Okay, next up we are looking at Planet Unknown, published by Adam's Apple Games, and for this installment we are playing on Sovranti, a digital implementation of board games that's a little bit like a board game arena crossed with tabletop simulator. So we have a full 3D environment, but also, like board game arena, it's not going to let us make a mistake. Rather, it's going to prompt us and walk us through everything, so there's no cheating and, ooh, what's this feat? What's this? Who's this handsome devil? Yes, Sovranti also has player avatars, so they're Quins. There you go, in case you're in any doubt that it was me. So the easiest way to walk you through Planet Unknown is just to start playing, I think. So we're not going to play with event cards, and I'll show you the asymmetric boards later. They're very cool. But basically, Sovranti is a tile-laying game, okay? So let's just pick some objective. Let's get rid of this one. So Sovranti is a tile-laying game. On every turn, you are going to lay a tile, like so, and you can move it around, and you can rotate it. Although to begin with, we strictly need to start off on the right-hand side of the board. Let's place that. Job done. And then every time you place tiles, depending on what you pick, the different colors of tiles, so in this case we have a green and a black, that's going to let us advance up the black sieve track and once up the green biomass track. And as you can see, there are all kinds of little rewards that you're going to trigger, some of which are pretty important. I'll also point out that these golden medallion symbols are victory points. So you're going to get a lot of victory points for advancing. And then look, there's 10 points up there for getting to the top of the water track. That's nuts. But additionally, you'll see there are victory points running around the edge of the map. And that's because depending on the width of the column or row, you're going to get Veeps for every column or row you've completely filled by the end of the game. But don't forget those objective cards as well that I looked at earlier. In this game, we want to create a 2x5 area of biomass, a 2x5 of tech, and 9 or more meteorites. I actually really like the meteorite mechanic. Let me just play a little bit longer and get deeper into this game so I can show off my rover. So, once you've advanced up the rover track one space, you get to place a rover miniature on the tile that you last placed. And the rover is how you interact with the three-dimensional elements of the board. So, if I'm able to drive this rover onto a life pod, which are otherwise crushed if I place tiles on them, then each life pod I get is going to go up here and get me a victory point. Potentially a bigger threat, though, are these meteorites. Every time, let's see if I can find one. Yeah. See all those red meteorite symbols on various tiles? When you place those tiles, when you choose to do that from this fun lazy Susan that rotates, so you always have a different selection, you have to place a meteorite, which looks like this in the fancy Kickstarter edition. And the meteorites don't do anything except they prevent all scoring of a completed row and column at the end of the game. And to hoover up those meteorites, you need to drive the rover over them. How do you do that? Well, as you place rover tiles, you get to advance up the rover track, which is going to give you rover movement points, which is going to let you drive your rover around. I like tile laying games a lot, but I especially like them when you have sort of people and vehicles that live in them. That's pretty foxy. I'm just going to show off energy as well, because that's a cute little mechanic. So we got a couple of tricky things with this tile placement. This has an energy type tile and a water type tile. Now, water type tiles are the only ones, if you've got water somewhere in that tile, that can be placed on top of water. But we're sticking to that rule from before that we have to... You place your first tile on the edge in Planet Unknown, and then you have to build outwards from there. So this water tile is one of the few ways that we're actually going to cross the water. However, maybe we don't want to do that, because one of the nice things about these energy colored things, every time you place one of these, you're getting to advance down any track you want potentially. But that's restricted by what tile types that this tile is next to. So the fact that I've placed this yellow energy tile next to grey and black means, look, we can advance along Civ, we can advance along Tech, or we can advance along Water, which it is also next to. And Planet Unknown is really good for this. We've seen lots of tile laying games where simply placing the tiles is the puzzle. Planet Unknown layers more puzzles on top of that with these wild energy states, the movement of your rover. So really, when you play Planet Unknown, you're creating all sorts of little puzzles for yourself. And I'm going to show you something really, really neat as well. I'm going to show you the alternate boards and corporations. So I've just reset the game here so you can see a few different options on fun ways to play. You can use event cards, which are going to basically mess you up every round. Not mess you up, some of them are actually quite nice. You can select the difficulty of the event deck, which I really appreciate, but this is nice. The asymmetric boards here. So on your right, you can change your corporation. So this is the default, but actually, look, we can mix things up significantly, including one board that just makes me excited just to look at. Look at this! Oasis Unlimited has all these weird lines that bounce you between different tracks. How does that work? I don't know. Let's pretend we're playing with it. But then additionally, you can change these planet boards. And I was kind of surprised when I first saw them. They're real weird. Like, this is a planet with some holes. This is a planet that's really, I don't think I want to live there at all. This is a planet that's just very troubling. This has got walls, maybe? Yeah, look, each quadrant has one restricted resource. Do not place a restricted resource in the quadrant. How's that going to work? This has weird energy barriers. This has some lava. This has a ring, wind. What's happening? Every tile placed on the planet's ring must also be anchored outside the ring. That's just neat. Lots of different ways to play. Oh, there's 3 planets. I like this game a lot. Placing tiles is always neat, but there's plenty of little innovative wrinkles and nice ways to play. That is Planet Unknown, and also, that's Sovranti.
In Merchants of the Dark Road, it is perpetually a dark and gloomy winter, one in which merchants make their living by ferrying goods from the capital to these orbiting towns. And in this game, you and your friends are those merchants, each equipped with a trusty steed and a valiant wagon that you will use to carry deliveries out into the world, fulfilling deeds, completing orders, and trying to make the most money and prestige. The game is played over 13 rounds, symbolising the 13 weeks of winter, in which each of you will take a turn of the following phases. First, you will plan out what actions you're going to take by manipulating these dice on your wagon. Secondly, you will move your wagon around this ring here to take various actions in these districts before resting up and ending your turn. And we'll talk about the planning phase first with this board. Essentially, what you'll be doing is picking any one of these dice in your reserve and using them to nudge an existing dice from its socket and placing it up here. This will allow you to take a different action depending on the value of the dice. There's an action to twist this dial round, changing the value of goods for later rounds. There's an action to take this illuminated dice, which we'll get to later, and socket it up here. But maybe the most immediately interesting action is using the number of the dice to craft a good to go in your wagon. We've got a 1 dice here, which means we can take a weapon from the supply and Tetris it into our available slots, like so. Once you've made the decision of which die and action combo to take, you can then move using the value on that dice, taking the number and moving your little wagon 1 step around this circular track. And where you land here is going to determine what actions you can take in the districts phase. And now the dice come into play again. If you've only got 1 night dice locked up here, then you can only choose 1 of the surrounding districts next to your roundabout to choose. So I might choose to go to the Great Bazaar, for example, and we'll talk about what each district does in a moment. But if you've also got an illuminated dice up here, not only can you go to 2 different districts in 1 turn, but you can also visit the individual building in between them to take an extra special action. Once you've taken your actions at these districts, you will scoop up the dice, setting any blue ones off to the side of your board and any illuminated dice off back into the supply, and reset various other things that are going to change throughout the game. We'll get to those later. But that is basically all of a turn. The real meat of the game is obviously in each of these districts and what you can do there. If, as part of your turn, you choose to visit the Great Bazaar, then you can take actions relating to this market wheel, spending money to acquire goods that you can flip for a profit later on. When you get to this space, the first thing you can do is turn any of these dice to any face that you want and putting them in the corresponding section. So I could change this to an instrument and place it here in the 2 section. And you also get 1 free clockwise rotation of the wheel, making things more expensive or cheaper depending on where they are. And then you get the opportunity to buy goods off the wheel itself, with the added bonus of doubles allowing you to take not only 2 goods, but 1 of them for free. So here I've created a brilliant deal for myself on instruments, just 1 coin for 2 of the supply, which I get to put in my wagon if I have room. Next to the Great Bazaar, the Queen's Commissions allows you to take 1 of these face-up order tokens, putting it onto your board and allowing you to fulfill it later on to get some points if you visit the corresponding town with the right items. The dark market down here is the rogues option. For a cost of 1 coin per space, you can move this disc around this circle, and wherever you end up landing, you get that combination of things. So a gun and some armor if I land on that space, which you can freely put into your wagon. And this space at the bottom will let you pick up commissions and deeds as well for some extra point scoring opportunities. The ringway in over here will let you pick up 1 of these hero cards, selling them the goods thereafter at the current market rate to pick them up and plop them into your wagon. These will help you a little bit later on, but for now they'll give you a little special bonus as well. Mervyn, for example, lets me store an item on top of him, freeing up some space in the wagon itself. These heroes want to travel with you to a certain town out here on the outskirts. Mervyn wants to go to Night Poem and Merry over here wants to go to Far Glen. But how do we get there? Well, there's 1 space left to talk about, and that is Yerg's Excursions down here. Now, you've got 2 options when you go to Yerg's Excursions. Number 1 is a trip to the ruins over here. At the ruins, any heroes you have will move this marker around here, letting you gain various kinds of upgraded goods, these gold sides, which you can sell to adventurers or you can sell to towns for a little bit extra. Very inviting. And the other thing you can do is spend lanterns off your cart to roll this ruins dice for a variety of different bonuses, like being able to go around this circle again, or even taking some more illuminated dice from the pool over here to go on your board. Now, Jörg's Excursions also houses the most interesting place to go in the game, this travel option, which allows players to venture out into these orbiting towns over here. The player that chooses to go on this excursion will become the caravan leader and extend the option to come with them to everyone around the table. Those players can then decide whether they want to come on an expedition. The person in charge will choose whether they want to go on the sad, lonely, dark and dreary route, or if they know a shortcut spending lanterns to get there quicker, but it's a little bit risky. That player will then place the card from their chosen deck face up in the middle of the table and take a companion from the available pool up here. I might go for this Ice Mouse, which will give me some little bonuses. They will also then take a number of these travel dice equal to the number of players seated around the table who are going on this mission. So for a 2-player game, just the 2 of us. You will then roll these dice into a communal pool, and whoever gets to choose them depends on whether you took the long route or the shortcut. If you took the long route, then the leader picks the dice first. They get first dibs on these rewards at the bottom of the card. But if you chose to take the shortcut, then the leader picks last, so it's a little bit risky. Then, eventually, players will arrive at their destination and be given the opportunity to sell goods, finish orders, and drop off their adventurers, as well as selling better goods for slightly better rewards. This is one of the ways you'll get prestige, which basically equals points at the end of the game. And then, after that, the leader will get to take an upgrade based on whether they took the long or short route. You get 2 upgrades if you took the shortcut, so risk and reward there, but you only get 1 if you took the long route. That upgrade will permanently sit on their cart, giving them access to a better action for the rest of the game. Now that is effectively all of the guts of Merchants of the Dark Road, a game about buying low and selling high and sending adventurers off to their little hometowns on the outskirts here, finishing deeds and upgrading your wagon. But at the end of 13 rounds, what determines the winner is not just pure points. You'll calculate how much money you earned, as well as how much prestige you earned throughout the game, and the lowest of those 2 is what will actually convert into points. You'll then add that into your victory points that you've gained from finishing deeds and various other things, and whoever has the most points at the end will be the winner. There's a few things that I have missed out in this preview for Merchant of the Dark Road, like specifically what these objectives might be in the middle of the table, or what these little buildings do on the outside, and I should have mentioned, this wheel on the market is like strangely magnetized. I don't quite know how it works. It shouldn't, but it does. But that is all kind of Merchants of the Dark Road's strength. For the size of this board, for the amount of sprawl that it has on my table, it's actually a pretty breezy teach with only a few little sub-rules you've got to explain along the way. And as a little added bonus, I was delighted to find out that there is a little solo adventures book inside of the box here with various adventures that one player can go on their lonesome against a rival cart called The Private Concern that you flip over here, which is pretty nifty. And that is all of Merchants of the Dark Road from Elf Creek Games, a fantastic little rooty merchanty game. I lost my thread right at the end there, but I'm keeping that take in. That's Merchants of the Dark Road. See you later.
Next, we are looking at Shinjuku by Gary Kamarchik, and this is a game about running chain companies. I know, you've seen it all before, but not this time, because this is modelled on an area of Japan where companies that run the different rail lines also own shops and department stores, and so we're able to kind of deliver customers to their own shops, which I think sounds like cheating, but apparently people do it in real life, and now you can get in on the action in this board game. So this is a game about laying track, but where you get no points for laying track or delivering people, but rather you're only going to get points by delivering people to your shops, which means you can then take those people forever and lock them up behind your player screen. And by completing sets of different customer types, there's 4 customer types. There's food, there's books, there's clothes, there's electronics. Every set of those you're going to get a ton of points. And that's how you're going to win the game. But interestingly, the customers aren't distributed evenly in this bag. While every customer can build 2 food shops and 2 clothing shops and 2 electronic shops, there are way more people in this bag that want food than want electronics or books. What kind of a dork would want books? Me, I would want AwSHUX. Anyway, this game is actually deliciously simple. I'm just going to walk you through the turn structure, and then I'm going to stop talking, basically, because that's the whole game. Your turn is going to start. Let's imagine green's taking a turn here. By the way, this is not what the game looks like to begin with. I've just set up a few turns in to give you a taste of how the game plays. So the turn is going to start with green drawing the card that's at the very end of the rack. So we're going to grab that, and all this stuff is going to slide down, and then the card is going to go there. Now I've got a card for Koto Prefecture here with some customers on. Now what that means is those customers that I picked up are going to go to Koto Prefecture. We got 2 people here who are desperate for shirts. That Koto card's going to go in my hand, but because I put 2 customers onto the board, I am now going to add 2 customers to the rack. And there's a way of doing this that I'm not going to teach you because life is short. So on your turn, you get to do 2 actions from a list of 5 actions, and you cannot do the same action twice. And many of these actions require playing cards, as if you were playing brass or Ticket to Ride. So something nice and easy you can do, you can... let's wear Ota. Ota's fine. You can play a card from your hand to open a shop in that prefecture. So I've got the Ota card here. I could play that, put a bookshop in Ota, and I'm living my best life. And that card's discarded. That would be half of my turn. And then I would do another action. You can expand. That is, you can place a rail line literally anywhere you want on the board. I can put it here, 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 here. Don't even need to discard a card. But let me grab that Ota card again. If you place a rail and you have the card matching the prefecture or the ward, I think it's technically what it's called, of either end of the railway line, you can discard that card and do a double build. You can build 2 pieces of railway for 1 action. Income, that's nice and easy. Income just means that if you have less than 4 cards, you drop to 4. If you have 4 cards, you draw 1 card. Move, and this is the meat of the game. So, moving is how you actually deliver these customers. Now, I've set up an example here. We've got a whole bunch of people in Minato Ward. We've got some people who count as 2 people as well. That's juicy. So, what you do when you do a move action is you play the card corresponding to that region. Yep. And then you would collect everybody in that region. Bum, 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 bum. They all get on the train. And then you're going to take those people, and then you can just ride them around the board forever with a few twists. They can't go to the same station twice. And if you use another player's rail, they get a free income action. So they draw up to 4 cards or they draw a card. But they only get this once. And what you're trying to do with this is trying to deliver people to shops. So you'll notice here, I have a food shop here that I'm going to try and deliver these people to. And it's probably going to cost me an arm and a leg, and you wouldn't actually do this when you're playing the game. But, so first off, we're going to go here. We're going to start in Blue's department store. Department store counts as all shops. So we'll give them a book. So that book customer goes to the blue player. Then we ride the whales. That book is going to go to the blue player again. We ride the rails. Oh, we go through Yellow's bookshop. We've already given away all of our books. Then we get here, and I have delivered a hungry person to my restaurant. And then this person, I'm just going to stop riding these people around because I don't have a closed shop. I can't get to it. So that person is actually going to get off the train in Edogawa, and presumably they're wondering what just happened and why they rode halfway across Tokyo to watch a bunch of other people go shopping and eat food and then be abandoned. Department stores seem cool, huh? Well, the 5th and final action you can do is build a department store. You pay 1 card matching a ward and a customer matching a shop you have. And then you'll see that these beautiful flower spaces, these are the ones that can be upgraded. So I would need to have, for example, a shop here, and then I would discard a game customer and play a matching card, and only then would I put a big department store there. That's obviously a lot of work, but department stores are absolutely huge, obviously, because they'll snaffle up any customers passing through them. But it gets better, because when you build a department store, you are going to take the firstmost stack of wild customers off this row. And that's absolutely going to help you make sets later, because these star tokens count as any customer of your choice. And then the number you reveal is how many customers there are going to be in the shop. So at the start of the game, there are only going to be 2 customers on these cards that everyone's collecting. 2 customers that you sort of got in the pipe, getting ready to go into Tokyo. But every time someone builds a department store, you're going to put more customers on those cards. And that is Shinjuku. The game ends when something happens. Oh, when all the customers are out of the bag. I'm a professional. And then you're going to try and make sets and hopefully make more sets than your friends and win the game. I think this is really cool. I think this is obviously, like all the previews, haven't actually played the game, but I like how simple it is. I like that immediately, even on learning the rules, I was thinking about how I would want to play this. I think it's neat. There you go. Shut Up and Sit Down says, I think it's neat. Let's move on to the next game.
If you've been playing a lot of train games recently and you want a deluxe upgrade to those roly boys, then look no further than the Little Plastic Train Company. They've got you covered with these delightful miniature plastic trains. These are compatible with all kinds of train games. They come in 5 different colours, so you can use them with games like Irish Gauge, Ticket to Ride, or Railways of the World. Each set comes with 48 trains as well as score markers in that colour, and they come in these delightful vintage looking train tins with original artwork. If you want to get an idea of how big these things are rather than guessing through the video screen, the trains are exactly the right size for a Ticket to Ride space and even fit into the insert from a standard Ticket to Ride box. As well as that, they show details up to 0.2 of a millimetre. That is blimmin' small. We've got the finished blue trains here and resin prototypes, not the final product, of the other models. Now, I know close to nothing about trains, so I've given them all their own nicknames. We've got Mercurus, Skinny Phil, Slim Peter, Chunky John, and Bin Boy. Even on the unfinished, unpainted prototypes, you can see the amount of detail and love in these little sculptures. And if you want to get nerdy for a minute, the finished versions are going to be made out of ABS plastic, the same stuff they use to make Lego. So these are going to be nice and durable if you sit on them or throw them out of anger. But where do I get these indestructible trains? I hear you cry. And don't worry, you can find them online right now. The Kickstarter is live right now. If you search Little Plastic Train Company Kickstarter, it'll surely come up, or click the links below. That's Little Plastic Train Company if you want to upgrade your plastic trains with better trains.
But wait, there's more. Sorry, this is probably really jarring because you've gone from watching like normal video to me on a webcam with a microphone, but you know, you can deal with it, it's fine. This just in, I just read it in an email, the Little Plastic Train Company is going to be giving away a complete set of trains as well as one set of the Mercury trains, and that will be happening across the AwSHUX weekend. Look out for that during the streams. And with that, that's the end of this preview video. Goodbye.
Up next, we have an exquisite little production, and I don't use that term lightly. As with all games in this series, I haven't played it personally, but my goodness, what a thing to look at. This is Chai Tea for Two, published by Steep Games and designed by Dan and Connie Kazmaier. And it's the 2-player sequel spin-off thing to Chai, which was a game about harvesting and making tea. And this is a 2-player only version, and it is even more gorgeous than the original game was. Just take a look at this. Take a look at these absolutely stunning tokens and tins for 6 different kinds of tea. The art on the cards, the little wooden tea harvester, the dice trays in 2 different colours. We've got a really rather special production here, and I'm going to walk you through how to play. So, in this game, we've got 2 personal player boards. We've got a player here and a player here, and you can make the game more advanced by using the reverse of these 2 player boards, as well as the reverse of your little personal cards that you get dealt to show, I don't know, loosely, there's a loose leaf tea joke there. But these cards kind of show who you're playing. They give you a different focus in each game, but you can flip them if you want to play the advanced game, so you don't have a special focus. You actually have a special power that you can use. But whether you're playing the advanced or basic game, the game has a similar structure. You need to fill ships, which are found here, with tea. And there's a short, medium, and long game, which sees the game ending when you've filled 3, 4, or 5 ships. But whatever length of game you play, whatever complexity you play, the structure of the game is going to be the same. So at the start of each round, the first player is going to move this little tea harvester a number of spaces around this grid, which is going to give both players a little bit of tea and some free tea movement. And what this means is, let me demonstrate with some black tea and some green tea, which in this game, both of these players would now receive. Any tea you acquire is placed on the bottom of your player board, and then what chai does is it encourages you to process these teas in the way you would in real life. In case it's not abundantly clear, this game is made by some people who absolutely love tea. It's full of all kinds of lovely little historical accuracies. The back of the manual has a little section on tea. I love tea, and I learned about tea just from playing this game. What a delight! So you acquire your tea at the bottom of your player board, and then you're going to be taking various actions and picking up bonuses that allow you to move the tea up your player board. You're also going to be acquiring contracts with ships that then sit at the top of your player board, and you want to push your tea from the bottom all the way up to the top and onto these ships. So each round is going to start with somebody moving this tea person a set number of spaces, which would move this thing over here. And then that's going to give you some free tea and some free tea movement. And then you're into the juicy worker placementness of it. Both players then roll their dice. Wish me luck. Can you tell which is my dominant hand? So we'll just push that away, and we're going to stick with the red tray here. You've got your dice. And this is a dice placement game. If you played a worker placement game, which sees people placing their... Oh, I've made such a mess with my dice. A worker placement game is a game where someone will take their workers and put them on a space to get a reward. A dice placement game is the same thing, but where the pips on the dice determine what you can do with your workers. So both players will roll their dice and then go back and forth, spending their dice to acquire different rewards on this lovely kind of segmented smorgasbord of boards. First up, by placing runs of dice over on these ships, you are basically bidding for those contracts, but another player can put a higher run of dice on the ships that then dislodge you and force you to go to a different ship, or you can then spend more of your dice to push them back off. But that is a tremendous amount of dice and to spend on one ship, and you can spend your dice doing other things, like acquiring these little cards. By placing a dice of a particular kind or higher on one of these spaces, you can then take a particular card that enables you to sort of upgrade your personal tea field. So if Blue used this space to acquire some Earl Grey, that Earl Grey that can then go next to any of the spaces on that personal player board, and it's going to help boost your tea up through the thing. So we've got Earl Grey, that's black tea, that's going to move that up there. The way this works in my head is kind of like reverse pachinko. You're going to put all this tea at the bottom of your board, and then you're going to acquire cards that fit onto the side, and all of your tea is going to kind of boom, 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 be bounced up your board and onto the ships at the very top. I've not quite seen anything like this before in a board game. I think it's really, really cute. So you can acquire different cards, which provide different powers. You can acquire ships. And also, then you can go to this space here, this traditional Chinese building looking place, and you are going to put dice in those slots in order to move cards around your board, or swap the location of cards, or turn cards back over, because some cards, once you've used them once to propel tea upwards, are going to be flipped over, and you have to go back to another space in order to flip them back over so you can use them again. So part of the game you're playing on this personal player board is to try and get as much, for example, black tea in one space as possible before you move the card there that pushes all the black tea upwards. You can also just move stuff manually. If you place dice that are the same over on this board up here, you are again bidding. You're bidding with your workers to get that much tea movement. Now, the most important thing on this board when determining who's first, second, and third is first off number of dice. But if you have the same number of dice, then it's the pips on those dice that determine who gets first, second, or third. And then at the end of the round, when everyone's placed all of their dice, whoever's in the top, middle, and bottom slot of this will get 5, 3, or 2 free tea movement. And then that's the end of the round, and you're going to do it all over again until someone has shipped off enough tea in their various boats to end the game. But the person who triggers the end of the game might not be the person who wins, because different ships are worth drastically different victory point values depending on how hard they are to fill. And also, those cards you're acquiring and you're socketing onto the side and the bottom of your board are often worth victory points as well. I am charmed by absolutely everything about this. I think the theme is really cute. I think it's made with so much love. I think the art and some of the creativity involved in the design is I am not often as charmed as I am by Chai Tea for Two. Again, as with all the games in these previews, I have not played this. I'm not sure the degree to which it necessarily hangs together, but let's just say this game made a very favorable first impression on me. Let's take a look at what the next game is.
Hello and welcome to the Digizone, where we're going to talk about stress Botics. This is a Eurogame that is dense, heavy, chewy, full of choices and rules. So if you're into that kind of thing, then it's all here. So in Stress Botics, you are the beta bots, and you want to go and mine a shed load of minerals from this planet, whilst avoiding cylindroids, who are going to try and eliminate your little cubey boys. And the way you're going to achieve this mining and avoiding is by using an alpha bot over here, an action server that's going to help you obtain minerals and become efficient. But some fool programmed stress into your little beta bots, so you're going to keep them chilled out and not having a mare by meeting objectives, quotas, and being good and productive. The game is at large a programming, resource management, and delivery game for 1 to 4 players, and we're going to play it over 13 rounds of 6 phases each. And largely these phases boil down to players first programming their actions, then resolving those actions, then performing maintenance, and finally checking out what events happen at the end of the round. Now each player is trying to get stuff, complete objectives, and make deliveries to get points, which we will use to win. Now, as you can probably tell, I'm going to give a comparatively very, very shallow overview of what this game is offering, and I'm going to skim over a bunch of stuff because this is an incredibly heavy game, but hopefully we can work out if it's for you, and even when I'm leaving things out. So we mentioned the game having 6 phases earlier, so logically we're going to start by going through each of those steps in order, and the first phase is the ships phase. And in this phase, we're going to move these ships 1 step further along their trajectories. Now, at the moment, this is fine, but if a ship ever leaves orbit without us meeting our quotas, we're going to get really, really stressed. Phase 2 is the programming phase, where we will draw and play these action cards from these decks, and you'll grab a varying number of these action cards and socket them into these program spaces at the top of your board here, ready to take actions with them in phase 3. So phase 3 is where you're taking these actions, and this is a huge part of the game, which I'm going to paint with super broad strokes because, my goodness, there is a lot to explain for just a small preview video here. So the actions boil down to 3 different things: moving, mining, and connecting. And those are all divided into sub-actions as well. And I'm going to list all of those sub-actions and just give you a little taste of what they do. So moving is the first action I'm going to explain, and it's the simplest. So when you move, you have to go from these connected paths to different vaults. And wherever you move your mini beta bot to that space, and your actual main beta bot to the corresponding space on this side of the board over here. And where you end your movement is going to do a bunch of different things. You could end in a vault, that'll give you some resources. You can go up here to get ready to do some later deliveries to these ships as they orbit the planet. Or if you end in the same space as someone else, then you might have to have a little fight with them depending on what your AI is currently feeling like at the moment, which depends on the number of batteries you have. The second kinds of actions are mining actions, and these come with 2 sub-actions. The first is extraction, which will let you take resources based on the pressure level of the planet up here, even taking lava over here from the core if you're right in the center of the planet. And the second kind of sub-action you can take is attacking, which lets you fight off these rival cylindroids that will be hanging around in the planet or up in your main vault. And these are going to be bad news in other places, so attacking them is a good idea because you can capture them, and that will reduce your stress and give you free actions, or you can scrap them for resources, or if you want, you can disintegrate them, and that will really get rid of your stress. And you can also, if you want, you can attack other beta bots, your pals playing the game, you can attack them, but that will create stress, but will decrease their shields. The last big action is the connect action, which will come with an absolute bunch of different sub-actions. It's the most dense and chewy action in the game. And the first of which will let you gain things like these items over here, which you can then further slot into your player board that will help you do various different things, like this one. I mean, I don't know what that does. Some of these more advanced productions will get you things like bonus shields or bonus batteries and that sort of thing. But one of the next actions you can take if you want is to activate one of your items. It's another sub-action you'll get from playing a connect card that'll let you gain or use the items that you have equipped to your robot. Another thing that you can do if you're sharing this space with the mini AlphaBot is to mess around with this console, giving you a whole slew of different actions, like repairing your bot or equipping items or drawing cards. And the very last sub-action you can do is to make a manual delivery if your robot is in one of these spaces and if a ship is hovering overhead. This is where you can spend a bunch of resources that you've gathered to fulfill these demand cards. And once again, this process is way more complex than I can realistically explain here. But the gist of it is that you need to make sure that the ship is overhead and you want to fulfill its criteria by dropping off resources you've been gathering. And that'll get you a crop of points at the end. So that's the general gist of the actions phase. It's what you're using these programmable cards for. And after that, we will have a maintenance phase where you can manipulate the lava or beta matter that you've gathered, turning them into resources or making batteries that will change the way that your bot behaves. And once we've done our maintenance, we have some shifts in the board state with the AlphaBot and the cylindroids taking their activations. This AlphaBot will move along the belt and will reveal events that will change the way that the game is played, like rotating this planet's core down here. Look, this will change the little paths that are available for people to take, and maybe it'll even flip later on, which will give you access to entirely different actions. This is also where the pressure of the planet changes, which will change the kinds of resources that are available in these vaults down here. And lastly, it will be where these cylindroids will attack the AlphaBot, maybe doing damage to it, which I think is quite bad. So you'll want to get the AlphaBot off the planet, which one player can do when it reaches its final vault here on its long journey over each round, because players will get points for doing so, and because if the AlphaBot takes a load of damage, it's going to stress everyone out and make them rubbish at doing their jobs. So I know I have barely scratched the surface of what this game is offering. There is so much stuff I haven't explained. There is iconography absolutely everywhere. This is the loosest possible overview I can possibly give for this game. But there is a truly wild amount of stuff going on here that I cannot even begin to explain. So if you are a fan of games by a certain Mr. Lacerda, then there's plenty of that kind of thing here. I mean, this is a higher weight rating on Board Game Geek than Mage Knight, so that can give you some idea of how chunky this thing is. But at the end of the game, players are going to get points for completing deliveries, delivering the AlphaBot from the planet, as well as any items and shields they have. And the player with the most points is going to win. So how hard can it be? If you're in the mood for something that will literally turn your brain into a gooey mechanics pulp, then you should check out Stress Botics from Two Tomatoes Games.